This evening I'm reading a short chapter from the book The Wisdom Codes by Braden. I hope you enjoy it. It's the Parable 1, The Woman and the Jar. Parable 1, The Parable of the Woman and the Jar. The use for this key is to remind us that our ability to love another person is directly linked to our capacity to love ourselves. The source is the Gospel of Thomas, discovered in its complete form as part of Egypt's Nag Hammadi Library in 1945. During childhood, we learn to compromise ourselves to survive the challenges of life. Sometimes, a compromise can be as simple as a young girl conforming to the desire of her father and brothers to watch a war movie rather than the love story she would have chosen, because she's outnumbered by males in the household. A constant pattern of feeling discounted in a family of origin often translates later in life to feeling unheard in the workplace or in the friendships and relationships. Sometimes we compromise something much deeper, such as when we quote-unquote give in and agree to do something that our deepest instincts tells us is not right for us. Each time we give into the pressure or temptation, we lose something within us, our sense of worth and self-esteem, and our trust in the safety of sharing our opinions and feelings. And while our losses can happen in ways that are socially acceptable, they are nonetheless painful. Forcing children to take on adult roles and losing their childhood following a family breakup, for example, the loss of racial identity through assimilation as cultures are forced together, and the survival of childhood trauma through repressing emotions of hurt, anger, and loss are among the many ways that we commonly lose these precious pieces of ourselves. Verse 97 of the Gospel of Thomas, the parable of the woman and the jar, is one of the most direct and compelling reminders of the consequences of taking cumulative losses over time. Following is the parable in its entirety. The kingdom of the Father is like a certain woman who was carrying a jar full of meal. While she was walking on the road, still some distance from home, the handle of the jar broke and the meal emptied out behind her on the road. She did not realize it. She had noticed no incident. When she reached her house, she set the jar down and found it empty. What does this parable mean? When we take a closer look at the statements that comprise Parable 1, we discover a powerful truth about us and our relationship to love. A statement-by-statement analysis reveals this truth. Line number 1. The kingdom of the Father is like a certain woman who was carrying a jar full of meal. The human body is often referred to as a vessel, or a jar, in biblical parlance, as we see, for example, in the second book of Timothy. Quote, "If a man therefore purge himself from these, he shall be a vessel unto honor." That's 2 Timothy chapter 2, verse 21. In Parable 1, the jar that the woman is carrying is us. We are the vessels that holds something of immense value. And just as the woman gradually loses something precious that she was carrying, food for her family, the parable reminds us of how we lose something precious from our vessel as well, often without even knowing it's being lost. Our capacity to receive love, as well as to give love in our lives. The meal in the jar is our love. It's also the many expressions of love, which include our capacity for compassion and care. As we see in the biblical examples, such as the book of 2 Corinthians, it's within the vessel of our body that we carry the earthly treasure of love. But we have this treasure in earthen vessels, that the excellency of the power may be of God and not of us. That's 2 Corinthians chapter 4, verse 7. Throughout our lives, it's through the different qualities of love that we comfort, nurture, and support others as well as ourselves during life's challenges. When we lose the people, places, animals, and things that we hold dear, it's precisely these qualities that give us the strength to survive our loss and get through the experience. Line 2 is, while she was walking on the road still some distance from home, the handle of the jar broke and the meal emptied out behind her on the road. Because we share our love, because we share our compassion, and because we share care willingly, these are also the parts of us that are most vulnerable to being lost, innocently given away, or taken from us by those who have power over us. Each time we trust enough to love or nurture someone else, and the trust is violated, it's like the handle of the vessel that has broken, allowing the meal of our love to be emptied. We lose a little of ourselves to the experience. Our reluctance to open again to such vulnerability is the way we often learn to survive our deepest hurts and greatest betrayals. It's our mechanism of protection. And each time we reduce our willingness to love by shutting off access to our truest nature of compassion and nurturing, we are like the meal that is slowly leaving the jar that the woman is carrying. Line 3. She did not realize it. She had not noticed no incident. Little by little, we lose our capacity and even our willingness to love. And our loss often occurs without us even realizing that the loss is occurring. The reason for our loss can be described on a spectrum that ranges from compromising ourselves by quote-unquote giving in, to unreasonable demands to appease family anger, to ensuring our very survival by participating in unhealthy and sometimes even illegal practices to feel safe in a relationship. Sometimes these practices become so routine in our lives that we follow them without acknowledging the magnitude of our loss. As in the parable, we don't notice the incidents. We don't notice, that is, until one day we reach into our vessel and discover that it's difficult for us to love another person because we've lost the foundation of love that we once had for ourselves. Line 4. When she reached her house, she set the jar down and found it empty. When we find ourselves at a point in life where we find someone we really want to love, someone we really want to open ourselves to and share ourselves with, we reach for love in our vessel only to find that it's gone. Instead of the love we thought we would find, we discover in its place a reservoir of emptiness. The reason is that we've lost ourselves over time, little by little, to the very experiences that we trusted enough to open to. The good news of the woman in the jar. The purpose of this parable is to remind us that our ability to love another person is rooted in our ability to love ourselves. The good news that the Master Jesus, or Yeshua, shared in the subsequent teachings of the Gospel of Thomas is that the parts of us that appear to be absent and the love that seems to have disappeared are never really gone. It's not like they are lost forever. Just as the soul can never be destroyed, our true nature can never be lost. During the times the world seems to be unsafe, we simply masked these parts of ourselves and hid them away for safekeeping. When we recognize the judgments that lead to the making of life's deepest hurts, we embark upon a fast path of personal healing. The key to heal our judgments is found in the parable that follows the woman in the jar. In verse 106 of the Gospel of Thomas, Jesus, or Yeshua, states, "When you make the two one, you will become the sons of man. And when you say, 'Mountain, move away,' it will move away. In other words, it's when we transcend our self-judgment polarities of right and wrong, good and bad, and success and failure, that we reclaim the lost parts of ourselves, including our capacity to love. In other words, the meal is our jar before it slips away from us. Discovering in other people what we've lost in ourselves. The reason that we sometimes betray our beliefs, our love, trust, and compassion is simple. It's survival. As children, we may have discovered that it was easier to remain silent, rather than voicing an opinion at the risk of being ridiculed and invalidated by parents, brothers, sisters, or peers. As the object of abuse in a family, it is much safer to give in and forget rather than to resist those who have power over us. As a society, we accept the killing of others during war, for example, and justify it as a special circumstance for taking a life. We've all been conditioned to some degree to give ourselves away in the face of conflict, disease, and overwhelming emotion. While we sometimes sacrifice ourselves consciously, more often than not, we do so in ways that we are only now beginning to understand. In each example, we have the opportunity to see a powerful possibility rather than the judgment of what is right and wrong. For every piece of ourselves that we've given away to be where we find ourselves in life today, there is the emptiness that is left behind. That emptiness is waiting to be filled. And we are constantly searching for whatever it is, and will do whatever it takes to fill our particular world when our jar is empty. When we meet a person who has within him or her the very attributes that we have lost, given away, or had taken from us by those who have power over us, the feeling is ecstatic. The person's complementary essence fills our inner void, and we say that we feel whole or complete. We will do anything to keep that feeling of wholeness alive. This is the key to understanding what happens when we find ourselves mysteriously and magnetically drawn to another person for no obvious reason. When we find our, quote, missing pieces in others, we will be powerfully and irresistibly drawn to them. We may even believe that we need them in our lives until we remember that what we are so drawn to in them is something that we still have within us. It is simply sleeping. In the awareness that we still have those characteristics and traits, we may unmask them and reincorporate them back into our lives. And when we do, we suddenly find that we no longer powerfully, magnetically, and inexplicably drawn to the person who originally mirrored those traits for us. Recognizing our feelings for others for what they are and not for what our conditioning has made them out to be is the key to mysteriously being drawn to another person. That unexplainable feeling that we have when we are with them, that magnetism and fire in them that makes us feel so alive, is really us. It is the essence of those parts of ourselves that we have lost and our recognition that we want them back in our lives. Recognizing what we've lost in other people and exercise. Each of us has masterfully given away the portions of ourselves that we felt were necessary in the moment for our physical or emotional survival. When we do so, it is easy to see ourselves as less than and get trapped within our beliefs of what remains. For some people, the trade-off happens before we ever know it, and we don't realize what has happened. For others, it is a conscious choice. When you encounter someone in your life who ignites a feeling of familiarity, I invite you to immerse yourself in the moment. Something rare and precious is happening for both of you. You have just found someone who has kept the pieces of you for which you are searching. Often this is a two-way experience, with the other person being drawn to you for the same reason. Using your power of discernment, if you feel that it is appropriate, initiate a conversation. Begin talking about anything at all, to maintain eye contact. While you are speaking in your mind, ask yourself this simple question: what do I see in this person that I have lost in myself, given away, or had taken by those who have power over me? What do I see in this person that I have lost in myself, given away, or had taken by those who have power over me? One more time. What do I see in this person that I have lost in myself, given away, or had taken by those who have power over me? Almost immediately, a response will come to your mind. It may be something as simple as feeling of realization, or as clear as a voice within that you recognize and that has been with you since childhood. Answers are often single words or short phrases. Your body knows what is meaningful for you. Maybe you simply recognize the beauty in this person that you feel is missing within you for the moment. Possibly it will be the person's innocence in life, the grace with which the person moves down the grocery aisle, the person's confidence as he performs the task at hand, or simply the radiance of his vitality. Your encounter need last only seconds, perhaps a few minutes at most. Those brief moments are your opportunity to feel the joy and exhilaration of the moment. This is you finding something of yourself in another person, something that you already have, and the feeling of what it is like to have that something awakened. For those who dare to acknowledge the feeling of familiarity in such momentary encounters, the mirror of loss is probably something that faces them every day. We find that completeness in ourselves, as others mirror to us our truest nature. Collectively, we are looking for our wholeness. Individually, we create the situations that lead us to find it. I'm going to say that again. Collectively, we are looking for our wholeness. Individually, we create the situations that lead us to find it. From clergy and teachers to older people watching youthful people, like parents watching their children, all are catalysts of feelings. In those feelings, we find the things we long for in ourselves, the things that are still with us yet hidden in our masks of who we believe we are. It is natural. It is human. Understanding what you're feeling about others are really saying about you may become your most powerful tool in discovering your greatest power. I'm going to repeat that last part again. Understanding what your feelings about others are really saying about you may become your most powerful tool in discovering your greatest power. You're not missing anything. It's all in you. You just have to remember who you are. How to use parable 1. Read this parable silently or out loud. As you read each phrase, contemplate how the theme of this ancient parable may be a metaphor that relates to your life today. Silently ask yourself the following questions. Do I recognize a parallel between the woman carrying the jar of meal on the road and me as a human vessel carrying love, trust, and faith on my journey through life? Just as the woman didn't notice the meal slowly draining from the jar she was carrying, have I lost, given away or had pieces of myself taken by those with power over me, or my energy sapped by responding to the needs of my family and clients gradually over time and not noticed my loss? When the woman reached in the jar for the meal, the jar was empty. Have I given away so much of myself over the course of my life, drained my emotional vessel, that it's now difficult for me to love fully and completely when I really want to? And finally, how do I go about reclaiming the parts of myself that I've lost, given away, or had taken from me by those who had or still have power over me? And to answer that last question, I would do the exercise. Get around people that excite you and enlighten you and uplift you, and look at them eye to eye and ask, what is it about this person that ignites me? And when you find out, accept, believe, receive the truth that what you love in them is simply being mirrored to you, because that thing, that those things that spark such happiness in you when you're around them, they're within you too. They're just there to remind you of that. Awaken those parts in yourself. You are whole. You are loved. You are love. Make it a point to become mindful of the people whom you feel good being around. Well, there you go. That was the parable of the woman in the jar. Thank you once again to Gregg Braden for writing this book, this wisdom codes. I hope you guys enjoyed that. Much love to you guys. Hasta luego.